Putin tried the same tactic again. He sent his drones toward Ukraine, but this time one of them missed its target. It didn't land in Ukraine, it landed in a NATO country. The Kremlin has presented incidents like this as an unintended side effect of war. But Romania didn't accept that explanation because this wasn't the first time. It was the 28th time. Bucharest's patience ran out. Its response wasn't limited to a diplomatic note. It came without delay, and it came hard. Behind Bucharest's severity lies a story most people don't know. NATO's red lines, the military power Romania has been quietly building, and Europe's shifting security architecture. To understand that transformation, you need to see the scale of what actually happened that night. On May 29th, Russia launched a 43 drone attack wave against southern Ukraine. The target was the port of Ismail on the Danube River directly across from the Romanian border. Most drones were intercepted by Ukrainian air defenses, but one of them, a Shahed-2, deviated from its course and entered Romanian airspace. Romanian radars were tracking it. 2 F-16 fighter jets and an Me-330 Sokot military helicopter were scrambled. Pilots were authorized to engage and shoot down the target. But the drone was flying at low altitude, just a few hundred meters above ground. It remained in Romanian airspace for only 4 minutes, covering approximately 10 kilometers. Time was extremely limited. Firing over a populated area would have created civilian risk. The F-16s were airborne. Authorization had been given, but there was physically no engagement window. The pilots hadn't yet reached engagement range when the drone struck, and the drone that fell on Galati wasn't the only one. The same night, in the Maramureș region, hundreds of kilometers away, another large unmanned aerial vehicle was found. Romania's defense ministry officially confirmed both drones were Russian-made. This was the 28th time Russia had violated Romanian airspace since 2022. But it was the first time an explosive-laden drone had directly struck a civilian structure. Think about that. 27 times before. This was the one that changed everything. President Nicușan summoned the Supreme Council of National Defense to an emergency meeting. After the meeting, he stepped before the press to announce a series of decisions. The Russian consul general in Constanța was declared persona non grata. The Constanța consulate would be closed. This decision wasn't random. Constanța isn't just Romania's largest port. It hosts the largest NATO naval base on the Black Sea. It serves as a transit point for military and civilian materials going to Ukraine. It's just an hour's distance from Europe's largest NATO base, Mihail Kogălnițanu, and the Devaselu missile shield. Former U.S. Army Europe Commander General Ben Hodges had openly said that Constanța would be the first target if Russia attacked NATO. This consulate was known to have served for years as a function for monitoring NATO naval movements, port traffic, and shipments to Ukraine in the Black Sea. Romanian intelligence had requested the expulsion of 2 Russian diplomats in Bucharest just a year earlier on grounds of gathering information in strategic sectors. The closure of the Constanța consulate blinds Russia's eye on NATO operations in the Black Sea. That's not symbolic, that's operational. At the same time, the Russian ambassador in Bucharest was summoned to the foreign ministry to deliver an official protest. CASAT proposed additional sanctions on Russian diplomatic personnel in Bucharest. In a single night, Russia's diplomatic presence in Romania was effectively pruned. And this pruning wasn't just symbolic, it was an operational loss. President Dan put the message clearly in his press statement. Romania was showing that it had definitively determined the drone source, route, and ownership. There was no room left for Kremlin denial. Interim Prime Minister Alelia Bologan took charge of the operational side, requesting from NATO the urgent deployment of military equipment to detect low-altitude drones. Romania pressed the button to manage this crisis. The speed of that button press was the fastest response from a NATO country since the start of the war. Romania's diplomatic response was harsh. But there's an even heavier card on the table, NATO's Article 4. Foreign Minister Oana Silvia Toiu spoke clearly after the Galati incident. Last night's event is an incident that justifies Article 4. This article is NATO's collective consultation mechanism. If any member country believes its territorial integrity or security is under threat, it can request formal consultations with its allies. It doesn't require the use of military force, but its diplomatic weight is significant because it brings the entire alliance to the table. No formal decision has been made yet, but the card's presence on the table has been declared. This card has been used before. Its results were concrete. In September 2025, Poland activated Article 4 after 19 Russian drones entered its airspace. That night marked a first in NATO history. Alliance aircraft fired at enemy targets in Allied airspace for the first time. Polish F-16s, Dutch F-35s, and Italian AWACS aircraft responded together. At least 3 drones were shot down. Polish Prime Minister Tusk told Parliament it was the closest they had been to open conflict since World War II. The concrete outcome of Article 4? Additional Patriot batteries were deployed to Poland. Airspace restrictions were imposed along the eastern border. Operation Eastern Century was launched. In other words, Article 4 isn't just a consultation. Concrete military steps follow. Romania's situation is different from Poland's, but in one respect, it's more severe. In Poland, 19 drones entered in a single night. No civilian injuries. Only one house was damaged. In Romania, a single drone entered but struck an apartment building directly. 2 civilians were injured. One of them was a 14-year-old child. And this wasn't an isolated incident. It was the 28th violation. Considering that Poland activated Article 4 with 19 violations in a single night, Romania's case with 28 violations and civilian injuries stands on diplomatically much stronger ground for the same step. Article 5, collective defense, is a different threshold. It has been activated only once in NATO history, September 11, 2001. Activation requires the definition of an armed attack. A single drone incident doesn't yet meet that threshold, but the escalation ladder is climbing step by step. In 2023, drone debris was found and NATO said no evidence of intentional attack. In 2025, Poland shot down drones and Article 4 was activated. In 2026, civilians were injured in Romania and a consulate was closed, each step higher than the last. And at each step, Russia's accident defense grows a little weaker. Romania hasn't yet played the Article 4 card, but the Allies' response came even without playing it. NATO's response came quickly and institutionally. Secretary General Mark Rutte delivered a message of absolute solidarity with Romania. He reiterated that the alliance is ready to defend every square centimeter of Allied territory. U.S. Ambassador to NATO Matthew Whitaker called the incident a reckless incursion. NATO spokesperson Alison Garr went beyond condemnation. She stated that potential additional defensive measures are being considered. This last detail matters. NATO was now signaling not just rhetoric, but operational steps. Beyond NATO, Europe delivered its own response. European Commission President Ursula von der Leyen said Russia's war of aggression has crossed yet another line. She announced the preparation of the 21st sanctions package, a package that hadn't been on the agenda before the drone incident. France took direct action, summoning the Russian ambassador to the foreign ministry and condemning the incident as an extremely irresponsible act threatening regional security. France's move is significant on its own because French troops are stationed in Romania. This attack indirectly threatened French personnel as well. Ukrainian President Zelensky said they were ready to support Romania in whatever way is necessary. And amid this wave of international reaction, the Kremlin's position was becoming increasingly isolated. Spokesman Peskov said Putin had been informed of the incident, but he didn't confirm whether the drone belonged to Russia. Romania had disclosed the trajectory, route, drone model, and origin. The Kremlin continued to refuse to claim ownership. Foreign Ministry spokesperson Zakharova threatened a swift response to the consulate closure. The side that dropped a drone on a NATO country's apartment building was issuing retaliation threats. Romania put the evidence on the table. NATO and the EU announced support in turn. The Kremlin had no card left but denial. Diplomatic response and allied solidarity matter, but Romania's real strength lies in the military transformation behind them. When Russia invaded Ukraine, Romania was one of the weakest links on NATO's eastern flank, a 650-kilometer border with Ukraine, a Black Sea coastline, ports within Russia's range, but an army lacking the modern capacity to defend them. In 2022, Romania was still conducting air patrols with Cold War-era MiG-21 fighter jets. An army trying to counter 2020 US threats with 1960s technology. 3 years later, the picture has completely changed. The MiG-21s were retired and replaced by F-16 Fighting Falcons acquired from Portugal and Norway. By 2026, the fleet has reached 49 aircraft. With 18 additional F-16s coming from the Netherlands, it's expected to grow to 66 or 67 modern fighter jets by year's end. The F-16 that scrambled on the night the drone fell on Galati were part of this fleet. Pilots had been authorized to fire, but the 4-minute window wasn't enough to engage. Romania is moving precisely to close this gap. F-16s can counter high-altitude threats, but stopping drones gliding at low altitude like the one in Galati requires a different architecture. Romania is building exactly that. Air defense has been restructured into a layered system. At the top, 4 Patriot PAC-3 Plus batteries, counter-ballistic missiles, and high-altitude threats. 4 more are being delivered by 2027. Below them, 231 Mistral launchers and 934 missiles from France, along with South Korea's Chiron short-range systems covering medium and low altitude, and the most critical layer, drone versus drone. Merup's drone interceptors, developed by former Google CEO Eric Schmidt's company, Project Eagle, were tested in Romania during a NATO exercise in April 2026 at the LCIX Crucible Eastern Phoenix exercise, attended by more than 400 troops and defense industry manufacturers. These systems were tested against maritime drone threats. The defense minister said they would be operational within days. Had the Galati drone come 1 month earlier, Merops would already have been in service. The transformation extends beyond air defense. In ground forces, Soviet-era tanks are being replaced by M1A2 CFV-3 Abrams. High-precision rocket systems have the capacity to strike targets in the Black Sea with a 300-kilometer range. But perhaps the most strategic step is Romania building its own drone capacity. 18 Bayraktar TB2s have been delivered. A joint drone production agreement was signed with Ukraine. A separate drone production and testing mechanism was established with the United States and the United Kingdom. Romania is no longer just a country protected from drones. It's becoming a country that produces drones. The financial scale of this entire transformation had been finalized just 1 week before the drone incident. On May 21st, the European Commission approved $16.68 billion in defense financing for Romania under the SAFE program, one of the largest defense packages ever granted to a single country by Europe. 15 separate programs: mechanized warfare modernization, layered air defense, Black Sea naval reinforcement, helicopter fleet renewal, defense industry localization. 1 week later, a Russian drone fell on that country's apartment building. And why SAFE was approved became understood by everyone overnight. There's a reason Romania is arming itself this fast, and why this drone incident resonated so widely. The reason is geography. Romania shares a 650-kilometer border with Ukraine. The Danube River forms most of that border. Russia's drone attacks target the port of Ismail on the opposite bank of that river, meaning every attack wave passes right by Romania's doorstep. It has a coastline on the Black Sea standing directly across from Russia's Black Sea Fleet. Romania isn't just a NATO member. It's the geographic lock of NATO's southeastern flank. And critical strategic assets sit atop that lock. At Deveselu military base in southern Romania, NATO's ballistic missile defense shield is stationed. The Aegis Ashore system, capable of destroying medium-range ballistic missiles in flight with SM-3 interceptors. This system is one of the cornerstones of Europe's missile shield. Russia has viewed this shield as a direct threat for years. It's demanded its removal. But Deveselu remains operational. Hail Kogal Netanu near Constanța is being transformed into NATO's largest base in Europe with a $2.7 billion expansion project. Approximately 3,500 Allied troops are permanently stationed there. With the newly launched LTEM program, a pre-positioned material logistics complex, the United States is turning this base into a forward depot. Any attack on this base would directly involve U.S. personnel, triggering a bilateral response without even requiring NATO consensus. But Romania's strategic role isn't limited to defense. It's also the southern gateway for weapons flowing to Ukraine. In January 2026, NATO opened its second major arms supply and coordination hub in Romania. Working in parallel with the Reshape hub in Poland, this center creates a southern route for the Donbass and Southern Front. In 2025, 220,000 tons of military aid were delivered to Ukraine through NATO logistics structures, 9,000 trucks, 1,800 rail cars, 500 strategic airlift flights. The port of Constanța and the Danube corridor have transported more than 193 million tons of goods under the EU solidarity lanes, sustaining both Ukrainian exports and the NATO supply chain. The drone that fell on Galati fell into this picture. It didn't just hit an apartment building, it hit the soil of a country an hour from NATO's missile shield. Neighbor to Europe's largest military base, home to the southern gateway of the weapons flow to Ukraine.